How to get better at painting and drawing. Today I have 2022 New Year's art resolutions for you. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Michelle, and on this channel we talk about all things watercolour as well as mixed media, painting, drawing, even a little bit of business and motivation for artists too. Please do consider subscribing. If you click the little bell icon, you can get notified every time I have a new video for you. Make at least one free video a week here on YouTube on a Thursday with extra content for Patreon subscribers. Now, I'm recording this video in the first week of 2022. However, this video is still going to be useful to you, whether you're a professional or an amateur artist, whether you're watching this just after it's come out, or whether you're watching it in 5 years' time and you're looking at it thinking, oh, look at that, she made that before we had all that trouble with the zombie apocalypse. These tips are still going to be useful for you. Now, I've got 2020 art resolutions. They're not my resolutions because obviously I'm a perfect angel. I already do all of these things, mostly. But these are resolutions that I suggest that you make. Obviously, some of them you're already going to know about, but hopefully you'll all find something really useful here. Do watch right until the end. The second from last one is the most amusing, and the last one is probably the most important thing that you can do this year to improve your painting and drawing. So let's jump straight in, and at number one, I want you to prepare your surfaces properly. So what do I mean by this? What I mean is that if you're painting maybe acrylics or oils on canvas, do you need to put something on your canvas first of all? Do you buy fairly sort of cheap canvases and you think, well, those first few coats of paint, they don't really work very well. I really should prepare the surface properly, put some kind of undercoat on. Or do you work on watercolour paper and you're fed up with it going bumpy all the time and you think, well, I really should stretch my paper. So I have a great video all about paper stretching. It's much easier than people say it is. It takes no time at all. Do resolve this year to stretch your watercolour paper, to prepare your canvases properly. I'll link to the paper stretching video in the description of this video and any other videos that I refer you to as well. You'll find them all listed down below. Just click the down arrow and you'll be able to see them. Resolution number two, which I strongly suggest you take up, is to get rid of really cheap materials. Now, I'm not talking about materials that aren't perhaps, 100% artist quality. I'm not talking about students' quality materials. I'm talking about those real rubbish materials often passed on from other people, or perhaps just bought at the beginning of your painting and drawing journey when you didn't know any better. Now, I never suggest binning things, but if you've got any materials that are really awful and you're just keeping them because, it makes it look like you've got a lot of stuff and got a lot of paints, but you know that you're probably never going to use them. If you do use them, you're going to regret it. What I suggest to you is pass them on to someone. Now, certainly where I live, there are always things like children's art groups that you can pass things on to. There are always play schools and nursery groups. Also, you can always look at old people's homes. Now, I am not suggesting that elderly people deserve to have rubbish shoved on them, but I used to actually teach occasionally in homes for elderly people, and some of them had a shockingly poor supply of art equipment. One of them I went to, the only thing that the residents had to paint and draw on, and these were residents with quite advanced dementia, but they still enjoyed their art very much. The only thing that they had was bright pink printer paper and felt tips. So you may find that, even if you think stuff is not good enough for you, there's someone out there that would appreciate it. I don't like environmental waste, but I do suggest that you clear out all of the really cheap stuff you've got and pass it on to someone who needs it. Resolution number three, and I suggest that you properly clean your palette and brushes after each painting. Now, there's a bit of an idea, isn't there, that artists have to work in a big old mess. Well, it really isn't helpful. It won't help you to paint better at all, and sometimes things just need a good clean. You want to walk that sort of fine line between, constantly cleaning up, which takes ages and is rather dull, and never cleaning up when your palette just is always full of mud and your brushes are in a real mess. What I like to do is just remind myself at the end of each project, it's a lovely start for a new project, to properly clean my paintbrushes rather than just rinsing in water, and to properly clean my palette and my workspace. Then I'm all ready for the next painting and giving myself the best possible chance of success. At number 4, I suggest you find yourself a workspace if you don't have one. So find yourself a working area. Now, I've run the whole gamut of things. I've got a room at the moment that I've repurposed to be an art studio. I've had a purpose-built art studio, but I've also been at the stage where I was bringing up a child alone, and there was no room at all for me to paint and draw, and I had to just use the dining table. Usually had to push aside, piles of ironing and my daughter's homework to find myself a little bit of space. But even if you're short of space, something can be done. Now, the first thing you want to do is look at the rest of your family. Does your husband have a whole room dedicated to his fishing equipment, but you can't even find, 2 shelves worth of space? The same, perhaps your children have an entire playroom, but you don't even have half a cupboard for your art equipment. So I just want to remind you that your hobbies are as valuable as everybody else's in your family. There's a thing that women do where we always put ourselves last. So if you're watching this and you're female and you're letting everybody else have space for their hobbies, you deserve space too. And your deserving of space to do your painting is not conditional on how good you are at it, merely on how much you enjoy doing it. Now, if there physically isn't any space in your house for you to have your own space, if you're living in a very small area, then what I suggest you do is get yourself one of those expanding art boxes. I've got one, I think, on the shelf behind me. Used it for years, the sort that you lift up like a toolbox. You can use a toolbox if you want to. Those tall carriers are great as well, the open ones, the sort that plumbers use, but a lot of my students repurpose those for art equipment. Maybe you just need something like a lap tray or a little pull-out table. Find yourself a way of, even if you can't have your own art space, of having an area where you keep all of your art equipment, and so that everything is ready to go. Maybe you need to get yourself a little fold-out table and just find yourself a little bit of cupboard space. But I do suggest that you find a way of having your own space to work in. At number 5, I suggest you resolve to work in mixed media. If you've only worked in 1 or 2 mediums up until now, if you always keep yourself within that same area of working, I suggest you have a go at mixed media. Now, of course, mixed media lends itself a bit more easily to things like watercolors and acrylics, but I've got a friend I know who paints in oils, and she's just started painting oils on top of watercolor. Almost every medium that you use can be combined with other media, and you can get some fantastic, interesting results. So make this the year that you experiment with mixed media. And if you're interested in watercolor and mixed media, I have a great video all about different media that you can combine with watercolors. I'll link to that one in the video description. At number 6, I want you to resolve to swatch your colors. So it doesn't matter what media you work in, whether it's watercolor pencils, whether it's oil paints, whether it's soft pastels, whatever you're working in, I suggest that you swatch your colors at a very minimum. Of course, all sorts of color charts can be made by combining colors, but the very minimum that you should do is just to swatch your colors on the surface that you would normally work on, whether that's canvas or whether that's paper or whether that's board, so that you can see what these colors look like in real life. You simply cannot rely on the little bit of wrapping around your pencil on that tiny square of color on the tube. They are notoriously inaccurate. Make your swatches from your art materials so that you can see what color things actually are. It's a good idea as well to either pin them up somewhere that you can see them while you're working, or to pop them in a folder near to where you work. At number 7, I suggest that you resolve to look at your old paintings. It can be really disheartening when we look at our work to think, well, I haven't progressed at all. One really easy way to see if you've progressed is to look at your old paintings. Of course, if you've just started, you won't have anything to look back on. But if you've been working for more than a year or 2, I guarantee you'll be astonished with how much you have progressed. At number 8, I want you to resolve to work intentionally. So what do I mean by that? Now, there's something that sports people and business people use called deliberate practice. And it's the idea, I've got a whole video on it, I will link to it below, but it's the idea about analysing your successes and failures and deliberately resolving to improve those specific things and to work on the things that are wrong and to capitalise on the things that you are doing right. So we can all just keep practicing, but if you feel like you're never improving, have a look at my video on deliberate practice and see how you can use your efforts to help move you forwards really, really fast. At number 9, my resolution for you is that I suggest you stop tracing your work. I know it can be really scary if you're not very good at drawing, but you'll never get better if you don't practice. Now, if you are doing a subject that's really, really tough, something like a portrait, I would suggest, above tracing, I would suggest using the grid method. I'm thinking of making a video on that very soon. Do let me know in the comments if that's something you would enjoy, and if I make that video in the future, I will link to it in the description of this one. By using the grid system, you're still partially drawing by eye, but you're just getting a little bit of help to make sure that you don't go too far wrong. At number 10, we're almost halfway through. I want you to resolve this year to get out of your comfort zone. That means trying perhaps a new medium and certainly trying new subjects. It's very easy for us to stick to the subjects that we know we're good at, and I am guilty of this one as much as anybody. But if you can push yourself to try some new things, you really will improve your painting and drawing skills. Nobody ever improved by staying in their comfort zone. At this point, as always, if you're enjoying this video, can I ask you please to click the thumbs up, click the like button. It really helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Many of you who watch me are also not subscribed. Subscribing on YouTube is free. You just have to press the button. You'll be helping my channel to grow, which enables me to make more videos for you. At number 11, I want you to resolve to stop getting halfway through your painting and reaching for an outline tool. This is where you all start looking around and thinking, how does she know what I do? Because I've been teaching real people in real classes for years, and this is a big thing that happens. So people get halfway through a watercolor painting and they're thinking, oh, it's not looking quite right, it needs more definition. I'll just grab that pen. Now, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with working with liner pens. There's nothing wrong with working in pen and wash. But the trick is, did you actually intend to pick up the pen when you started the painting? If you didn't, then what you're doing is you're grabbing that pen to negate the problems you have with tonal contrast. So if you get halfway through a painting and you're thinking it needs a bit of pen, it doesn't need a bit of pen. What it needs is better tonal contrast, and then you won't need the pen. So I want you to resolve only to use a pen if you planned it from the start of your painting. For number 12, I want you to resolve to finish your work. So many people abandon their paintings and drawings halfway through. Now, there is a stage with many art forms. Now, with oils, you might start with darks and work to light, and with watercolors, you might start light and work to dark. With acrylics, you may block in main areas. There is a stage known to professional artists, and we call it the ugly stage. It's that stage halfway through when you get really disheartened. You had all of those big ideas about what your painting was going to be, and now it looks absolutely awful, and you think, well, shall I just cut my losses and start something else? Most of the time, it's just going through the ugly stage. Now, I'm going to do a video all about this and the reasons why it's important to finish your work. But for now, just resolve to push through. Finish your painting no matter how disheartened you might be feeling halfway through. Chances are it'll turn out absolutely fine. At number 13, are you drowning in old work? I want you to resolve to clear out your old work. Now, some people will tell you to keep everything you ever painted so you can look back on it and see your progress. There's certainly something to be said for that. Other people will tell you just to get rid of stuff you don't like. So I think really we could take a little bit of a middle ground here. I don't think it's necessary to keep everything that you've ever painted. But on the other hand, nor should you just clear everything out. Now, what I did was when I went back through my old work was I asked myself a question. Now, I might not have liked the painting as an overall painting, but maybe there was one thing in there that I liked or one thing that I've learned. So if you look at your old work and you see one particular thing that you did that you thought was quite clever and you really quite liked, or it reminds you that you learnt one particular thing, or you just find something of value in that painting, then you should keep it. However, if you find a piece of work where you feel like you were just mucking around and you didn't learn anything, and just looking at the damn thing makes you feel depressed, then feel free to get rid of it. There's no art police. You don't have to keep everything. At number 14, I want you to resolve to photograph or scan every piece of artwork that you do, and certainly go back and photograph or scan any decent artwork that you've produced in the past. Now, there are multiple reasons for this. If you do sell your work, then you may need a proper copy of it, because you can still make prints of that work. But even if selling work is not something you do, it's really important that you have a record of your work. We're all finding that there are more environmental disasters going on. In the terrible situation that you might be affected by fire, by flood, or just by a leaking roof, and lots of artwork gets damaged, you're really going to wish that you had a backup copy of your work. You may also give something away as a gift. You may sell your work. You may do a commission for someone. I've done this in the past. When I first started out, I did some really nice paintings that I sold, and I don't have a photograph of them. It makes me really sad to think of it. So I want you to resolve to keep some kind of digital copy of all of your work. At number 15, I want you to stop comparing yourself to other artists. It's very easy. We go online, we see someone's work that's so fantastic, it can be really disheartening. But the thing is, if you just started 6 months ago, you could be looking at someone who's been painting for 30 years. You just can't compare one artist with another. And just because that person has fantastic draftsman skills, maybe you have better colour mixing skills. We're all completely different. If somebody's a wonderful loose painter and you paint very tightly, very botanically, there's no point comparing yourself to that other artist. We are all different as human beings, and at the end of the day, comparing yourself to other artists will not help you to improve one iota. At number 16, I want you to resolve to stop talking negatively about your own work. Stop talking your work down. You're actually giving your brain an instruction to fail. I want you to stop saying things like, I can't draw houses. I want you to stop saying things like, my skies are always awful. I want you to stop saying things like, I have no idea how to mix colours, I'm useless at it. All of these things are giving your brain instructions to fail, and actually it's quite a cop-out. It's much easier to say to yourself, well, I can never paint skies, than it is to sign up for some kind of course, to do some research, to do some extra practice. These things are always more difficult. There's nothing that you can't learn to get better at and improve at, so stop telling yourself negative things, because your brain will listen to you. At number 17, this year I want you to resolve to join some kind of painting group. Now this could be a real life painting group. Those are a bit tricky in the pandemic. I've pretty much had to give up real world teaching because of the problems with the pandemic, but there are lots of online spaces as well. So maybe you're already in lots of groups, but if you just sit at home and paint by yourself, you're really missing out on some love and support from other people who also like to do the things that you like to do. There are all sorts of online groups now. There are spaces on things like Reddit. There are loads of Facebook groups. I've got a fantastic Facebook group. I'll link to that one in the description of this video. I'll put a little thing up on screen as well so you can see where it is. Everybody is so kind and supportive in there. I don't allow anybody to be unpleasant to anybody else. There are also some of the large art magazines, certainly in the UK, some of the large art magazines also have online spaces, and so do some art societies have online spaces where you can talk to and share work. Most of the Facebook groups are also closed groups, so no one else is going to see your painting and drawing other than other artists, and you might be a little bit nervous about this if you're a beginner, but let me assure you that artists are some of the nicest people on the internet, and they're nearly always really nice to amateur artists. There's nothing to feel afraid of. So if you've just been sitting at home learning to paint and draw by yourself, make this the year that you find some new artistic friends. At number 18, I want you to make this the year that you resolve to buy that one thing that you need. Now, one of my hobbies is sewing, and I've been getting along for ages without an overlocker machine. I've been sewing stretch knits on an ordinary sewing machine. It takes me absolutely ages. It's not even as if I can't afford to buy an overlocker machine, and there are some sales on at the moment, so I have resolved just to go out and buy myself one just to make it happen. So if ever you start painting and you go to sort of put your sky in and you think to yourself, oh, if only I had a big flat brush. And if you find that you always say this to yourself, and every time you start a painting you're thinking, God, if only I had a big flat brush, whatever that tool is that you need, whatever that colour is that you need, and every single time you start painting you suddenly remember, oh, I don't have a lemon yellow, I really meant to get a lemon yellow, I'll use this other one instead. Think about it right now. Think about what you need, whatever that tool is. If you can afford it, write it down on a piece of paper and resolve to get it. We all kind of struggle on without the things that we need, and sometimes they aren't even very expensive. If that's the case and there's something that would make your painting or drawing easier, make a note to get it bought. At number 19, I want you to resolve to plan your composition properly. Now, composition, for me, it was the hardest thing to learn. I was actually quite good at painting and drawing, and I've always been good at colour mixing, but I didn't really understand composition. I made lots of mistakes, and it's one thing that can make your paintings look really quite bad, even if you've drawn them accurately, even if the colour mixing is great, even if your techniques are fabulous. If the composition is poor, it can affect your whole picture. So if you're working from a photograph, don't just slavishly copy the layout that's already there. Ask yourself, could this be improved a little bit? What works for photographs isn't always the same as what works for paintings. As I said, composition can be a little bit tricky to get your head round. I've got a fantastic video that's going to tell you about 10 composition mistakes that you could be making. You can find that one in the description of this video. At number 20, I want you to resolve to let things dry, to take a break while you are working. Now, it can be almost disingenuous when you see art tutorials on the internet, because if you imagine that I'm doing a painting and I'm doing a tutorial for YouTube, you're not going to see all the times when I dropped my pencil. You're not going to see when I went to answer the door to the Amazon courier. You're not going to see that break I took to take something over to my mother's house. And you're not going to see that time where I just sort of looked at my work and said, I'm not really sure where to go with this. And so I left it overnight. It can be a real problem on the internet. We have so much video editing. You'll watch a tutorial and you will imagine that the professional artist got the whole thing done in 3/4 of an hour, when in fact it may have taken 4 or 5 hours. It may have taken even longer than that. Many professional artists will take days over their work, and that's not days spent painting. That's a lot of time spent thinking. We take frequent breaks. If we're not sure what should happen next, we stop. We mix colours up, we swatch things, we try, we hold them up, we put them down, we think about them, we leave it overnight, we let things dry, we go away, we come back again. And if you can do this too, it's really, really going to improve your painting and drawing. Don't imagine that you have to get a painting completed in one sitting. I see so many people, particularly in an art class where you've got maybe 2 hours, I see so many people just rushing their work, rushing to get it finished. It's far better just to wait, just to put it aside, see what it needs with fresh eyes and finish it later. So we're nearly at the end, and at number 21 I've got a slightly amusing one for you. This one is particularly for complete beginners. I want you to resolve to stop painting and drawing babies. Now, if you are new to painting and drawing, you want to be starting with fairly simple things, maybe some simple landscapes, perhaps some flowers. Animals and people are really, really quite tricky. If you have only just picked up a paintbrush 3 months ago and the thought goes into your head, oh, let me paint my grandson, I would like to encourage you to stop. Now, babies have really weird faces anyway. Most of them look like strange little aliens, and they're even harder to draw successfully. The problem with children is that they have things on their faces that adults have, such as lines and shadows, but as soon as you start to put these in even slightly heavily, what you end up with is a 18-month-old that looks like an 80-year-old. I can't tell you how many awful pictures of babies I see on painting and drawing groups. You know, I open up my phone and I'm just like, oh my goodness, what is that? And an amateur artist has tried painting a baby. Babies are one of the hardest subjects on earth. Please don't tackle them unless you're a really, really competent artist. Start with something a little bit easier and you'll be much happier with the result. At number 22, I want you to resolve to stop painting on top of bad drawings. So many times online, I've spoken about this before, I see people asking for advice and help on their paintings, and there's nothing wrong with the painting at all. What's wrong is the underdrawing. Painting never ever improves a bad drawing. You can't take a bad drawing, and a lot of artists do this. They take a bad drawing and they think, well, maybe it will improve if I put some paint on it. It won't improve with paint. It will just make the errors look more glaring. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I can't draw very well, Michelle, so I want this to be the year that you resolve to learn to draw. Anyone can learn to draw. So you can get started today on improving your drawing so you never find you get halfway through a painting and realise that the drawing just wasn't good enough. So do let me know in the comments which of these painting and drawing resolutions you found most useful. Perhaps you have some of your own resolutions to share with us. As always, drawing is a great place to start, and you can watch 10 fast drawing tips right now.